Welcome to Talks with Summer, seeing the world through the eyes of another. Today I have with me Richard Stack. Welcome, Rick. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Summer. Thank you for having me here. I guess when I think about my career, I think that's how I'll introduce myself. It's a very circuitous journey, wasn't particularly planned. The common thread between what I've done and what I'm doing is a desire to help people. For the initial part of my career, I went to law school. I worked in a public defender's office for a brief period of time. That was in the Midwest. I got a job offer to do legal and lobbying and writing and think tank sort of work for a group called World Hunger Education Service here in Washington. That's what brought me here in 1978. That was a short-lived gig because the nonprofit ran out of funding, but I landed some good work with the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington. I coordinated infant mortality hearings in the District of Columbia. We had kind of an outcome that we wanted to highlight, and that was that if nutrition were better reinforced for women and young children and babies, the infant mortality rate would come down. And one of the solutions that the Interfaith Conference had was, let's develop a food bank. Now, this is back in 1979, 1980. So I was the founding executive director of the food bank, and I worked in anti-hunger work for a good decade at the local level. From World Hunger Education Service, I turned my vision from global to local. I learned all aspects of public communication, communicating with employees, communicating with donors, communicating with the community, communicating with the media, fill in the blank public communications. That's what I was learning by the seat of my pants. And I made a leap from that work, hands-on social service work, to teaching public communication at American University, which I did for about 30 years. I retired in 2019. And my swan song, my last achievement before retiring, was an anti-death penalty documentary called In the Executioner's Shadow that still has legs. It's still, even though it was released in 2018, it's every bit as valid today, as relevant today. So I present that in my retirement from time to time. And a topic that intrigued me from 15 years ago, before I retired, but I carried my research through retirement. I wrote a book that was recently published on grieving called We Who Grieve. So again, I think the common denominator is trying to be helpful, trying to provide service, and trying to be creative in the way I do it.
Where did you grow up? Tell us about your childhood days.
I grew up in the Midwest in St. Louis, Missouri. I think I had a very pleasant, happy childhood. I felt loved. I felt supported by my family. My mother was a terrific cheerleader for me. I'm nowhere near as good a writer as she made me out to be, but because of encouragement, I kept going with it. Played a lot of sports when I was a kid. I enjoyed that very much. There was a lot of lessons to be learned. I've carried that into my adulthood, coaching kids in baseball and basketball and soccer. It was a happy time. And I think from my childhood emerged two of my greatest influences in my life, my mother and her mother, my grandmother, two of my best teachers in terms of living life.
So I wanted to go off on a tangent actually and ask you from your previous answer is I see the common theme in your documentary and in your book, and there's death and there's talking about the real stuff. There's talking about things which make people uncomfortable. So what attracted you to this topic? What attracted you to the end? What attracted you to grieving? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. When my mother passed away, I was handed a book by Anita Diamant called Saying Kaddish. Kaddish is the Hebrew prayer for the dead, which is very interesting because there's no mention of death in the prayer. It's more an appreciation for life and that sort of acknowledgement. My mom died 15 years ago. The book was given to me during the immediate aftermath of her death. In Judaism, the 7 days after somebody is buried is called sitting Shiva. And Shiva is the number 7. So while I was sitting Shiva for my mother, I was handed this book that explained a lot of the rituals I was observing on her behalf. I didn't know what was behind them. I didn't quite know why I was doing them. I didn't know what the symbols were about. This book explained that. And I found it very comforting in a time when I was really devastated. And as I was coming out of the Shiva period, it occurred to me that those rituals are different from one culture to the next, from religion to religion, from ethnicity to ethnicity. And I just wondered how other people comfort their mourners. And being a faculty member at a university here in Washington, D.C., American University, I'm surrounded by faculty and students and staff from all over the world. So I began asking that question to those people. So how do your people comfort their mourners? And I began collecting stories. The documentary kind of disrupted my research flow and my writing flow for the book, which was great because I'm really proud of the documentary as well. But when I retired, I returned to the book and collected my research. And I was also began volunteering before retirement to give me something good to do in retirement. I began volunteering with the Wendt Center, W-E-N-D-T, which is a grief counseling center. And I found that my volunteering was informing my research, and my research was informing my volunteerism. And so after a few years of being a volunteer there and starting with my retirement, when I found I had much more time on my hands, the first couple of years after my retirement, I pulled my research on grieving out of mothballs and really rolled with it, and then got it published in 2023, 2024.
Thank you for telling us, because this topic is close to me also, having been through losses in the past few years. That was one of the things which I found as a synchronicity when I talked to you, when you mentioned that. And I think I hadn't told you at that time that what had happened in my life, but I had made that link already. And I noticed how loss connected us instantaneously.
Yeah. I think that in our culture, I don't know about India. I do know a little bit about India, but I do know in our culture that we don't talk about death, which I think is true in many, many cultures, although I think most are more open and willing to discuss feelings than ours. And that was one of the things that also motivated me about the book, is that this is something that we need to talk about. Talking about death, it's not contagious. It doesn't mean you're going to die just because you're talking about it, but it's important to confront those feelings, try to figure out how to be helpful, how to be useful when it's a family member who passed away and the rest of your family needs support, or a good friend. I remember I did a fair amount of anti-death penalty work through my teaching career. Communication for social change was the theme of my courses, and the social change was really geared for criminal justice reform, making the death penalty the tip of the iceberg, the target of my work. One of the people I interviewed, Shuja Graham, who spent 3 years on California's death row before he was exonerated, and now he lives in Tacoma Park. I remember this exchange that we had. He said, the way you should try to live your life is when you were a baby, you came into the world crying because you're a baby. Everybody else around you in the room is happy and laughing, and they're so happy to have you. Live your life in such a way that when you exit, when you die, when you leave that room, you're content and everybody else around is crying. So that's one of the things I think about when it comes to grief and grieving, is let's discuss it in a way that is not a disservice to society, not a way to hide from it or cover it up, but it's the most universal emotion. Let's admit that.
Thank you so much. I personally am so appreciative of you talking about all of this because I was also one of those people who didn't know how to feel. And I sometimes feel that I delayed my grief and I delayed my pain because I was trying to be what they say strong, thinking that if I deny my feelings, then I'm being strong for everybody
Go
else,
away.
push them away for a later time.
But when you do that, they fester.
Yes, and it becomes worse when you feel it.
Right. We're not taught how to deal with other people's grief, let alone our own. And another motivator for the book, it was through COVID times. That's when I was researching and writing, and the world was getting more divided. Our country was, polarized. And I was trying to think, what is something that brings us together? What is a commonality? And again, I come back to this idea that dying and death and grieving are the most universal emotions that we feel. Everybody feels happy when a baby is born. Everybody feels sad when someone dies. Let's admit that. Let's unite on that. Let's empathize.
Yes, thank you. And one of the other things which came to my mind was that, like you said, that we don't grieve, but people get uncomfortable when we do grieve a little bit. I remember during the past few years, if someone would ask me what happened, and I would tell them this happened. And sometimes I would start with, oh, I don't want to bum you out. I don't want to bring you down, but this happened in my life. And later on, I started thinking about this, that I've been through this, I'm in pain, and yet I'm still trying to make them comfortable so that my grief does not spill over on them.
That reflects well on your politeness and on your sensitivity. But I think we need to get beyond that. There are times when we just need to be vulnerable, be honest, and share our emotions. And that's how we'll eventually heal. You never get over it. And that's a terrible, terrible phrase. Oh, just get over it. You can work through it. And that hole in your heart will get smaller over time, but it'll never go away. But unless you work at it a little bit, unless you talk about it and think about it and reflect on it, you're not going to even start the healing process.
Is there any incident which you would like to share which shaped your life?
Incident that shaped my life. Yeah. When I was a third-year law student, and this helps me relate to the young men and women who I taught at the college level. I was at the end of the line of my legal studies, and I really wasn't jazzed by almost any of it. Criminal law appealed to me a little bit, but the rest of it I didn't have much interest in. But I powered through, and I just struggled on, and I was very close to getting the degree. And yet I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I was at a crossroads in my life. Hey, education's just about over. Recess is done. Spring break is no more. It's time to face the real world. What do I want to do? And I was observing a Yom Kippur fast, the Day of Atonement. And I was listening to a rabbi, and I was really too hungry to pay any attention to him. But I was paying attention to my belly, and the question emerged in my head and in my stomach and in my heart: why do some of us on this planet eat well, and others don't eat at all? There's starvation on a planet that produces enough for everybody, and so that became the focus of my law school thesis paper. I was going to law school in Kansas City, Missouri, which is right at the breadbasket of the country. So I found a professor who was willing to guide me in this. It was a very unusual thesis for law school. It wasn't about torts. It wasn't about contracts. It wasn't about wills and trusts. It was something going on in the world. What are the legal ramifications? What are the legal aspects holding us back from feeding everybody? That work and that inspiration got me reading a book called Food First by Frances Moore Lapay. She's best known for her book, Recipes for a Small Planet. But that thinking in my last gasp of law school, that book got me to Washington, D.C., where I worked with World Hunger Education Service and started me on a path of being helpful in ways that I didn't even know how.
What is something which is very close to your heart, or what is something you are passionate about?
That's an easy one, my family. Bev and I have been married for 43 years. We've got two great kids, young adults, I shouldn't call them kids. And every spare thought of mine is directed towards them.
Who has been the most influential person in your life, and how have they impacted you? I know you told us recently in the previous question it was your mother and grandmother, but I would still ask this again.
That's okay. So I've discussed my mom a little bit and her influence on me. Her mom, my grandmother, in Yiddish, my bubby, I was blessed to have in my life living under our roof for 17 years or so. And one of her quotes that always sticks with me, she was not a woman of means. She was well educated, but never had much money, she and her husband. But when she was the guest in our house, my family member, really, the quote that I recall best is, "You might as well be happy, it costs the same." You might as well be happy, it costs the same. And her point was, you can choose. You can be bummed out, costs you the same. You can be happy, you can be depressed, you can be whatever. You can choose, you can control it. It's within your power. And she had a very difficult life. She left pogroms in the former Soviet Union. She brought her 3 children over here to this country in 1929, just a few months before the stock market crashed. But she was one of the refugees, one of the immigrants that thought, the streets are paved with gold here. This is a fantastic country compared to where I came from. And she had this sense of optimism that carried her onward. And I'm happy to have inherited that. That was her gift to me.
Is there any advice you would give your younger self looking back at your life now?
Yes. That advice would be confident. Somehow, some way, you keep working, things will work out. And I have to say that whole idea of confidence, I think, is what attracts people to other people. People like winners. You know, there's a phrase, I'm not crazy about this one, but I understand it. Fake it till you make it. But the faking part requires a certain confidence or belief in the future that, okay, I may not know where I'm going, but I'm going to get to somewhere good because I'm going to keep trying, and I have no idea who I'm going to meet or what things are going to happen, what kind of corners I'm going to have to take, what bend in the road. But if I stay on a path with a heart, good things will happen. Be confident. That's what I would tell to my 18-year-old self.
I was going to just say that I've often heard of this fake it till you make it, and I made it my own and changed it a little bit, and I made it into face it till you make it.
Face it
till you make it. So I would would tell myself that you cannot run away from it. Keep going, keep facing it, and you will get through it.
Facing it is much more courageous, much more honest, less deceptive, more transparent. I think the key word is it entails courage, whereas faking it is, it's not necessarily a good thing. But in either case, you need to plow forward with some sort of sense of confidence, sense of belief, sense of courage.
What do you feel the purpose of life is for you? Or in other words, what do you feel is your personal quest in life?
I come back to this concept of being helpful. That's one of the things I pray for in the evening is, please God, help me to be helpful to others. So I think I think the purpose of life is to leave this world better off than it was when you found it, when you came in. And that's, subject to everybody's own opinion, own interpretation, subject to the best use of your own skills. You got to figure that out. Some people are scientifically minded, some people are artistically minded, others are good in math, whatever it might be. Find what you're good at and put energy into that so that you can make your world a little bit better, and by doing so, make the greater world a little bit better, being helpful. I'll come back to a previous question and the person that I admire so. Another influence of my life was, another example, my mother again. When she was dying, one of my favorite cousins asked her, "What's the message you want to leave behind? What is your purpose in life?" And she said, she was very weak at that time, but she lifted her head up and she said, "To give, to give, to give." And, she didn't have to define that. My definition is she wasn't talking about materialistic gifts. She was talking about what you got inside, what works for you, what your skills and talents and courage allows you to do. Give that to the world.
And I would like to say that whenever I've had the time or whenever we've met and had conversations, I've always felt that you've been very helpful to me in terms of encouragement, in terms of when I've told you all my ideas, my crazy ideas and all my thoughts. And even with the podcast and doing it, we could not do it. I could not do the recording right the first time. And your encouragement is something which has always made me feel that yes, I can do it. And we all need that. And to me, you are already helpful. And I would like to say thank you so much.
You are welcome. In summer, I say, you go, girl.
Thank you.
You've got a lot to offer.
Thank you.
A lot of energy, a lot of brilliance, a lot of creativity, a lot of talent.
Thank you. It means a lot to me. I would like to say that, honestly. Is there any book, quote, or philosophy that has shaped your outlook on life?
The quote is, "Might as well be happy it costs the same." One of the books was Food First by Frances Moore Lappé. Another book was Dead Man Walking by Sister Helen Prejean, which is a terrific, terrific movie, 28, 29, 30 years old, but still holds up about the death penalty in a very balanced way. And along the same lines, I was very influenced by a book by Brian Stevenson, also a death penalty book called Just Mercy. So those three books, if I were stranded on a desert island, those are the three books I'd like to have with me because they were so thought-provoking, life-changing, and inspirational.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you again, going back to the topic of your work with your documentary and death penalty, and tell us a little bit more about this topic. What motivates you to do this work? I know it can get, it's painful because you're sharing pain, you're feeling other people's pain. So what makes you dive into that pain and help people?
In law school, as I mentioned, I worked in a public defender's office, first as a student and then for a little while after I graduated. And as a student, it was very eye-opening to me to see the mistakes that were made large and small in the court system every single day. And by extension, it appalled me that this system can take human life, even based on a system that is prone to error. And then I got beyond that. The books I've written focused on mistakes and exoneration and people who were innocent getting exonerated finally, by and by. It took years and years and years. But I realized that's the innocence issue, and that's a fairly easy take on being opposed to the death penalty. Nobody in their right mind wants to see an innocent person executed. What's a little bit more difficult, and this is where Sister Helen Prejean came in with her book that really broadened my thinking. Dead Man Walking is not the story of an innocent person who gets exonerated. It's the story of a guilty person who ultimately gets executed. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. I still think it's a great book and a great movie. Read it, see it. But she does it in such a balanced way that you understand the sensitivity of all the various problems, all the various personalities and their issues that are involved in the taking of this person's life, whether he committed a terrible crime or not. None of us want to be thought of as the worst thing we've ever done. Even a murderer has many good things about his life that are completely discarded when he's executed, and certainly execution snuffs out any chance of redemption or rehabilitation. Some people aren't capable of being rehabilitated, and I understand that. And if they're kept in prison, which is a terrible place, that's enough. Prisons, the death penalty keeps the rest of us no safer than a life sentence. It snuffs out the possibility of rehabilitation. It's ridiculously expensive. It's a terrible use of our tax dollars. And it's a barbarian habit that makes us all weaker and lesser people because of it.
I completely agree with you. No human being has the right to take another human being's life.
Well put.
If it were an ideal world, what does that look like in your eyes?
An ideal world. An ideal world would be one in which people are smiling at each other, people are helping each other out, whether they know the other person or not. There wouldn't be this sense of distrust and suspicion. We would be very well exposed to people of other cultures and other backgrounds. We would embrace differences. That's my ideal world, where people support each other in a very positive way, that we have an outlook on life where it's not a scarcity mentality that if you're successful, I can't be. It's an abundance mentality. Your success feeds my success, and we can be successful together.
There's place for everybody.
Yes.
What is something that you would like the world to know about you, which you feel is often misunderstood?
I'm a little shyer than people make me out to be. To be a professor, I had to work up a little bit of a showtime mentality before going into class, and that was true for every one of my 30 years of teaching. It got easier, and I got more comfortable with it, but it's still going in to either lecture or conduct a seminar, have a good discussion. There's a nervous edge to it that actually it's a good thing. It keeps your energy up, but I think it's a lot easier to adapt to that if you're outgoing, if you're an extrovert, which I'm not. So it's not a terrible secret, but that answers your question.
Yes. And before I go on to the last question, I would like to go back to your book once more. Like I said, grieving is one of the most important things to do. And I tell that to myself every day still. And I try to keep my heart open for myself and for everybody else out there who has not been through this, who is definitely going to go through this in the future. It's an inevitable truth of life which we cannot deny. And I wish I had accepted it and be better prepared for it sooner. And so I would love for you to talk more about it and say whatever you want.
It can be had online, all of the major online outlets. My preference is that people go to their local bookstore or their local library. And if it's not on the shelf there, ask them to order it. If you ask them to order it, if you're going to buy it, they'll buy it for you. They'll get it for you. It's here in several Washington bookstores, including Politics and Prose, which is, to me, the premier bookstore, independent bookstore in Washington. It's also at the People's Book in Tacoma Park, a few other places. But nationally, if you're listening to this elsewhere and maybe it's not on the bookshelf of your favorite bookstore, just ask them. They'll order it. It's an inexpensive book, $20. And I think it's a book that should be on everybody's nightstand. Some are just because of the very thing you just said. It's something that is either going to happen to everybody. We're all going to be in grief, or you already have been, and probably going to happen again. It's meant to be a comfort, I would say, within the immediate aftermath of a death. And by immediate, I'm defining that as from the moment of your loved one's death till maybe 2 years out. If somebody is paralyzed with grief beyond 2 years, they need some professional help. But this book can go a long way in starting the healing process and pushing people forward at their own time, at their own pace, read a few pages at a time, read the whole thing at one sitting, however you want to ingest the book. But I do think it's very valuable, and it's meant to be a comfort to those in the throes of grief.
Thank you. And I have the copy myself, and there's a beautiful Rumi quote towards the end. Would you like to read it out for our listeners?
The Rumi quote: "Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life search for love and wisdom." Again, it's the acknowledgement of the universal sadness, the most painful emotion, but to embrace it rather than deny it, to work through it with others, alone when you need to be alone, with others when that's helpful. But working through that process, you'll find that you're not alone and that there's a whole new life waiting for you with a hole in your heart, and it's going to be different than the previous life, but you can return to a very rich, rewarding life as you progress.
Yes, it's a new you, and here's to keeping our hearts open.
Yes.
Which brings me to our last question, which is, from your entire journey in life so far, what would you like to share with our listeners which you feel would be helpful to them?
Be hopeful, be happy, try to find positive ways that you can channel your strengths into helping others. I think that's where hope lies. That's where we rise above the dismal daily reality that our lives could become if we don't try to help others. And I think that's the combination of service and worship and spirituality all combined in trying to figure out how to help somebody else with his or her issues.
Thank you so much, Rick. This has been most wonderful, and it was my honor to have you on my podcast today.
My honor as well.
To know more about what I do and offer, visit my website, samroshni.com, or find me on Instagram at samroshni coaching. Thank you.